empty and marvelous. The opening words of the oldest Zen poem say that the perfect way, Tao, is without difficulty, save that it avoids picking and choosing. Only when you stop liking and disliking will all be clearly understood. A split hair's difference, and heaven and earth are set apart. If you want to get the plain truth, be not concerned with right and wrong. The conflict between right and wrong is the sickness of the mind. The point is not to make an effort to silence the feelings and cultivate bland indifference. It is to see through the universal illusion that what is pleasant or good may be wrested from what is painful or evil. To see this is to see that good without evil is like up without down, and that to make an ideal of pursuing the good is like trying to get rid of the left by turning constantly to the right. One is therefore compelled to go around in circles. Zen is a liberation from this pattern, and its apparently dismal starting point is to understand the absurdity of choosing, of the whole feeling that life may be significantly improved by a constant selection of the good. One must start by getting the feel of relativity, and by knowing that life is not a situation from which there is anything to be grasped or gained, as if it were something which one approaches from outside, like a pie or a barrel of beer. To succeed is always to fail, in the sense that the more one succeeds in anything, the greater is the need to go on succeeding. To eat is to survive, to be hungry. The illusion of significant improvement arises in moments of contrast, as when one turns from the left to the right on a hard bed. The position is better so long as the contrast remains, but before long the second position begins to feel like the first, so one acquires a more comfortable bed and, for a while, sleeps in peace. But the solution of the problem leaves a strange vacuum in one's consciousness, a vacuum soon filled by the sensation of another intolerable contrast, hitherto unnoticed, and just as urgent, just as frustrating as the problem of the hard bed. Zen does not take the attitude that it is so futile to eat when hungry that one may as well starve, nor is it so inhuman as to say that when we itch we should not scratch. Disillusionment with the pursuit of the good does not involve the evil of stagnation as its necessary alternative, for the human situation is like that of fleas on a hot griddle. None of the alternatives offer a solution, for the flea who falls must jump, and the flea who jumps must fall. Choosing is absurd because there is no choice. And from this point of view one can see the sun in the midst of the rain, scoop clear water from the heart of the fire. But the viewpoint is not fatalistic. It is not simply submission to the inevitability of sweating when it is hot, shivering when it is cold, eating when hungry, and sleeping when tired. Submission to fate implies someone who submits, someone who is the helpless puppet of circumstances, and for Zen there is no such person. The duality of subject and object, of the knower and the known, is seen to be just as relative, as mutual, as inseparable as every other. We do not sweat because it is hot. The sweating is the heat. It is just as true to say that the sun is light because of the eyes as to say that the eyes see light because of the sun. The viewpoint is unfamiliar because it is our settled convention to think that heat comes first, and then, by causality, the body sweats. To put it the other way around is startling, like saying cheese and bread instead of bread and cheese. Thus the Zen Rinkushu says, "Fire does not wait for the sun to be hot, nor the wind for the moon to be cool." This shocking and seemingly illogical reversal of common sense may perhaps be clarified by the favorite Zen image of the moon in the water. The phenomenon moon in the water is likened to human experience. The water is the subject, and the moon the object. When there is no water, there is no moon in the water, and likewise when there is no moon. But when the moon rises, the water does not wait to receive its image, and when even the tiniest drop of water is poured out, the moon does not wait to cast its reflection. For the moon does not intend to cast its reflection, and the water does not receive its image on purpose. The event is caused as much by the water as by the moon, and as the water manifests the brightness of the moon manifests the clarity of the water. To put it less poetically, human experience is determined as much by the nature of the mind and the structure of its senses as by the external objects whose presence the mind reveals. Men feel themselves to be victims or puppets of their experience because they separate themselves from their minds, thinking that the nature of the mind-body is something involuntarily thrust upon them. They think that they did not ask to be born, did not ask to be given a sensitive organism to be frustrated by alternating pleasure and pain. But Zen asks us to find out who it is that has the mind, and who it was that did not ask to be born before father and mother conceived us. Thence it appears that the entire sense of subjective isolation, of being the one who was given a mind, and to whom experience happens, is an illusion of bad semantics. For there is no myself apart from the mind-body, which gives structure to my experience. It is likewise ridiculous to talk of this mind-body as something which was passively and involuntarily given a certain structure. It is that structure, and before the structure arose, there was no mind-body. When we are no longer identified with the idea of ourselves, the entire relationship between subject and object, knower and known, undergoes a sudden and revolutionary change. It becomes a real relationship, a mutuality in which the subject creates the object just as much as the object creates the subject. The knower no longer feels himself to be independent of the known. The experiencer no longer feels himself to stand apart from the experience. Consequently, the whole notion of getting something out of life, of seeking something from experience, becomes absurd. To put it in another way, it becomes vividly clear that in concrete fact I have no other self than the totality of things of which I am aware. This is the Hua Yen doctrine of the net of jewels, of Shi Shi Wu Ai, in which every jewel contains the reflection of all the others. Man's identification with his idea of himself gives him a specious and precarious sense of permanence. For this idea is relatively fixed, being based upon carefully selected memories of his past, memories which have a preserved and fixed character. But to the degree that he identifies himself with the fixed idea, he becomes aware of life as something which flows past him, faster and faster as he grows older, as his idea becomes more rigid, more bolstered with memories. The more he attempts to clutch the world, the more he feels it as a process in motion. On one occasion, Ma Tzu and Po Chang were out for a walk, when they saw some wild geese flying past. "What are they?" asked Ma Tzu. "They're wild geese," said Po Chang. "What are they doing?" demanded Ma Tzu. Po Chang replied, "They've already flown away." Suddenly Ma Tzu grabbed Po Chang by the nose and twisted it so that he cried out in pain. "How," shouted Ma Tzu, "could they ever have flown away?" This was the moment of Po Chang's awakening. The relativity of time and motion is one of the principal themes of Dogen's Shobogenzu, where he writes, "If we watch the shore while we are sailing in a boat, we feel that the shore is moving. But if we look nearer to the boat itself, we know then that it is the boat which moves. When we regard the universe in confusion of body and mind, we often get the mistaken belief that our mind is constant. But if we actually practice Zen and come back to ourselves, we see that this was wrong. When firewood becomes ashes, it never returns to being firewood. But we should not take the view that what is latterly ashes was formerly firewood. What we should understand is that according to the doctrine of Buddhism, firewood stays at the position of firewood. There are former and later stages, but these stages are clearly cut. It is the same with life and death. Thus we say in Buddhism that the unborn is also the undying. Life is a position of time. Death is a position of time. They are like winter and spring, and in Buddhism we do not consider that winter becomes spring, or that spring becomes summer. Dogen is here trying to express the strange sense of timeless moments, which arises when one is no longer trying to resist the flow of events, the peculiar stillness and the self-sufficiency of the succeeding instants, when the mind is, as it were, going along with them, and not trying to arrest them. The measuring of worth and success in terms of time, and the insistent demand for assurances of a promising future, make it impossible to live freely both in the present and in the promising future when it arrives. For there is never anything but the present, and if one cannot live there, one cannot live anywhere. The Shobogenzo says, "When a fish swims, he swims on, and there is no end to the water. When a bird flies, he flies on, and there is no end to the sky. From the most ancient times there was never a fish who swam out of the water, nor a bird who flew out of the sky. Yet when the fish needs just a little water, he uses just a little, and when he needs lots, he uses lots. Thus the tips of their heads are always at the outer edge of their space. If ever a bird flies beyond that edge, he dies, and so also with the fish. From the water the fish makes his life, and from the sky the bird. But this life is made by the bird and the fish. At the same time the bird and the fish are made by life. Thus there are the fish, the water, and life, and all three create each other. Yet if there were a bird who first wanted to examine the size of the sky, or a fish who first wanted to examine the extent of the water, and then try to fly or to swim, they will never find their own ways in the sky or the water. This is not a philosophy of not looking where one is going. It is a philosophy of not making where one is going so much more important than where one is, that there will be no point of going. The life of Zen begins, therefore, in a disillusion with the pursuit of goals which do not really exist. The good without the bad, the gratification of a self which is no more than an idea, and the morrow which never comes. For all these things are a deception of symbols pretending to be realities, and to seek after them is like walking straight into a wall upon which some painter has, by the convention of perspective, suggested an open passage. In short, Zen begins at the point where there is nothing further to seek, nothing to be gained. Zen is most emphatically not to be regarded as a system of self-improvement or a way of becoming a Buddha. In the words of Lin Chi, if a man seeks the Buddha, that man loses the Buddha. For all ideas of self-improvement and of becoming or getting something in the future relate solely to our abstract image of ourselves. To follow them is to give ever more reality to that image. On the other hand, our true non-conceptual self is already the Buddha, and needs no improvement. In the course of time it may grow, but one does not blame an egg for not being a chicken. Still less does one criticize a pig for having a shorter neck than a giraffe. What is, therefore, to be gained from Zen is called Wu Shi, or nothing special. For as the Buddha says, I obtained not the least thing from unexcelled complete awakening, and for this very reason it is called unexcelled complete awakening. The expression of Wu Shi also has the sense of the perfectly natural and unaffected, in which there is no fuss or business. The attainment of Satori is often suggested by the old Chinese poem, Mount Lu in misty rain, the river Che at high tide. When I had not been there, no rest from the pain of longing. I went there and returned. It was nothing special. Mount Lu in misty rain, the river Che at high tide. According to the famous saying of Qing Yuan, before I had studied Zen for 30 years, I saw mountains as mountains and waters as waters. When I arrived at a more intimate knowledge, I came to the point where I saw that mountains are not mountains, and waters are not waters. But now that I have got its very substance, I am at rest. For it's just that I see mountains once again as mountains, and waters once again as waters.